It happened on a quiet Sunday night, the kind of night that used to feel safe. The house smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary, my mom's favorite meal to make when the whole family was home. My dad sat at the end of the table, silent, his eyes fixed on his plate. My younger brother Ethan scrolled on his phone, half listening to the conversation. I thought it was just another awkward dinner, until my dad slipped me a folded note under the table. At first, I thought it was some inside joke, maybe a reminder to take out the trash after dinner. But when I opened it, I froze. The note had only 4 words written in his shaky handwriting. Don't drink the water. If you're watching this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because what happened after my dad slipped me that note will make you think twice about who you trust at your own dinner table. I looked up slowly. My dad didn't say a word. He just stared back at me, his face pale, his eyes tense like he was waiting for my reaction. My mom, sitting across from me, smiled warmly, pouring another glass of water into my cup. You've barely touched your drink, sweetheart, she said. You must be tired from the drive. The sound of the water hitting the glass felt deafening. My heart was racing. I glanced at Ethan, but he didn't notice anything. My dad's hand trembled slightly as he cut his food. Something was wrong. That night, the table looked perfect, candles burning softly, plates neatly arranged, and a pitcher of clear water right in the center. It was the kind of dinner that should have felt normal. But there was a tension beneath it, like everyone was pretending not to notice something awful. I hadn't been home in months. I'd been living on campus, finishing my last semester of college, and Mom insisted I come home for a proper meal. She sounded excited when she called, but her tone had felt off, too cheerful, almost rehearsed. When I got there, Dad's face told me everything was different. He looked thinner, tired, and distracted. The man who used to tell bad science jokes at dinner now barely said a word. Mom filled every silence with small talk, stories about neighbors, cooking, anything to keep us from asking questions. But I noticed the tension between them the moment I walked in, the way Dad avoided eye contact, the way Mom kept her hand on his shoulder whenever he tried to speak. It was like she was managing the conversation. And him. Halfway through dinner, I took a sip of my water just to break the awkward silence. It tasted normal, but when I set the glass down, I noticed Dad watching me closely. That's when he slipped the note. I reread it under the table, my pulse pounding. Don't drink the water. It didn't make sense. Why would he write that? Why not just say something out loud? I looked at him again, but he gave the slightest shake of his head, a silent warning to stay calm. Mom caught my eye and smiled. Everything okay, honey? I forced a smile back. Yeah, just tired. Good, she said, her voice calm but cold. You'll sleep well tonight. Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes didn't match. I wanted to ask Dad what was going on, but Ethan was right there, and I didn't want to scare him. After a few minutes, Mom stood to refill everyone's glasses again. As she poured mine, I slid my hand over the rim to stop her. I'm fine, Mom. Really, I said. She hesitated, her smile faltering for a second before she forced it back. All right, suit yourself. Dad didn't touch his drink either. He just sat there, staring at the glass in front of him like it was something dangerous. The tension was unbearable. The only sounds in the room were the scrape of silverware and the clock ticking on the wall. When dinner finally ended, Mom excused herself to get dessert. The moment she left the room, Dad leaned across the table, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily, he said, listen carefully. Don't drink anything she gives you tonight. Don't argue. Just play along. My throat tightened. Why? He looked toward the kitchen, making sure she couldn't hear. Something's wrong with her. She's not the same. Before I could ask what he meant, Mom returned, smiling as if she'd heard nothing. She set a tray of pie and 2 fresh glasses of water on the table. No one leaves until we finish dessert, she said lightly. Dad's hand clenched into a fist. I glanced between them, trying to understand what was happening, trying to pretend everything was fine while the world underneath that table was falling apart. That was the night everything I believed about my family, about safety, love, and trust, began to shatter. I didn't know it yet, But one warning note from my father was about to expose the darkest secret in our home. After dinner, the air in the house felt heavier than before. My mom hummed softly to herself in the kitchen, washing dishes as if nothing unusual had happened. My dad disappeared into his study, closing the door behind him. Ethan and I sat in the living room, pretending to watch TV, but the noise felt hollow. I couldn't focus. My mind kept going back to that note, those 4 words that didn't just sound like a warning, they felt like a cry for help. When Mom called me to help dry the dishes, my heart pounded in my chest. I walked into the kitchen trying to act normal. The smell of soap and lemon filled the air. She smiled at me like always, but now I saw something different in her eyes, something cold and sharp that didn't belong there. "You've grown so much," she said softly, passing me a plate to dry. "It's nice having everyone together again." "Yeah," I said carefully. "It's been a while." She looked at me with that same smile, but her hand trembled slightly as she set another glass in the sink. "Your father's been acting strange, hasn't he?" she asked. My grip on the towel tightened. "What do you mean?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "He thinks I don't notice, but he's been sneaking into the garage late at night. He locks the door, keeps boxes of chemicals out there. You should have seen him last week. He came inside covered in dirt like he'd been digging." I swallowed hard. Maybe he's just working on something for school? She laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. "He hasn't taught a class in months." That stopped me. Dad had told me he took a short leave to take care of things around the house. I never thought to ask why. My mother turned back to the sink, her reflection in the window staring back at me with a strange, empty calm. "You know," she continued, "he's always been jealous of how close you and I are. Don't let him turn you against me." Before I could respond, the study door opened down the hall. Dad stepped out, holding a folder in his hand. His voice was steady, but tight. "Emily, could you come here a second?" Mom didn't turn around. "She's helping me," she said sharply. He ignored her. "Please, Emily." I hesitated, then followed him into the study, closing the door behind me. The room smelled like old paper and coffee. He locked the door, then motioned for me to sit. "Listen to me," he said quickly. "Whatever she's saying, you can't believe it. She's not the same person anymore." I frowned. "Dad, you're scaring me. What's going on?" He opened the folder and pulled out a series of printed lab results. "This is from the water test I ran last week. The levels are off the charts. Lead, mercury, arsenic. She's been drinking it for months. So have I. But someone's been increasing the concentration." I stared at the papers, not fully understanding. "How do you know it's not just contamination from the pipes?" "Because I replaced the entire filtration system myself," he said. "I've been monitoring it. It wasn't an accident." A chill ran through me. "You're saying Mom's been poisoned?" He nodded, his face pale. "And she doesn't even realize it. But here's the thing. I tested her medication too. The pills in her bottle don't match what the label says. Whoever switched them wanted to make her worse, not better. I tried to process what I was hearing, but it was too much. You think she's being poisoned? But by who?" He looked me straight in the eyes. "Someone inside this house." I froze. The air in the room felt thin. "You're saying Ethan?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but someone has access to everything. The kitchen, the water filters, the medicine cabinet. I can't rule anything out." Just then, we heard footsteps in the hallway. The door handle rattled. My dad quickly gathered the papers and shoved them into a drawer. The lock turned halfway before stopping. My mom's voice came through the door, calm and sweet. "Dinner's cleaned up. Are you two done whispering?" My dad forced a smile. "Almost." Her tone changed. "Good. I made tea." He didn't answer. We both stood silent until her footsteps faded away. He turned to me. "Don't drink it." I nodded, my throat tight. He unlocked the door and stepped out first. The kitchen lights were dimmer now. 2 cups of tea sat on the table, steam curling from the rims. Mom smiled as we entered, her eyes glinting under the warm light. "There you are," she said. "You must be thirsty." Dad didn't sit. "We're fine," he said firmly. Her smile didn't falter. "You always say that." She turned to me. "Emily, it's peppermint. Your favorite." I could feel Dad's eyes on me, silently begging me not to touch it. I sat down, trying to think of something normal to say. My hands shook as I picked up the cup, not to drink it, but to keep from looking suspicious. As I lifted it toward my lips, Mom's gaze followed every move. She was watching me like she already knew. "Go on," she said softly. "It's good for you." I pretended to take a small sip, letting the cup touch my mouth without drinking. "It's nice," I said weakly. Her expression softened. "Good girl." Dad stood rigid, his jaw tight. "I'm going to check the garage," he said suddenly. Mom's tone sharpened. "Now? You can't leave your family for one night?" He didn't respond. He walked out the back door, the sound of it closing echoing through the house. Mom turned back to me, her voice gentle again. "He's been different lately, hasn't he?" I could barely breathe. "Maybe he's just stressed." She smiled faintly. "You should be careful what you drink, sweetheart. You never really know what people put in things these days." Her words made my stomach twist. My fingers tightened around the cup, and I realized something I hadn't noticed before. A faint, metallic smell rising from the steam. That was the moment I knew. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just paranoia or stress. Something terrible was unfolding inside that house, and the truth was sitting right in front of me, smiling. The rest of that night played out like a slow-motion nightmare. Every second felt stretched thin, every glance between my parents charged with something unspoken. I could barely focus on the TV as Ethan flipped through channels, the sound of cheerful sitcom laughter clashing with the suffocating tension in the house. My mom sat on the couch beside him, a soft smile on her face as she stroked his hair. My dad hadn't returned from the garage in over 20 minutes. I couldn't sit still anymore. I stood up, pretending to stretch. "I'm going to check on Dad," I said. Mom's hand froze midair. "He'll be back soon," she said, her tone light but her eyes sharp. "You don't need to bother him." Her words carried the kind of sweetness that hides a blade underneath. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "It's fine. I just want to ask him something about school." She tilted her head slightly, still smiling. "You've changed since you left home. You don't trust me anymore." That sentence sank into the air like poison. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. "That's not true," I said quietly, forcing a calm voice. She turned back to the TV without another word. The silence between us said everything. I slipped into the hallway, my footsteps quiet on the wood floor. The house creaked in that old familiar way, but now every sound made me flinch. The door to the garage was slightly ajar. Cold air seeped through the crack, carrying the faint smell of oil and metal. I pushed it open slowly. My dad was standing by the workbench, leaning over a small container filled with clear liquid. A flashlight lay on its side, casting a beam across scattered papers and test strips. He looked up when he heard me. "Close the door," he whispered. I did as he said, my pulse racing. "Dad, she's watching everything. What's going on?" He handed me a small plastic vial. Inside was a bit of murky water. "That's from the kitchen faucet," he said. "I just tested it again. The contamination levels have doubled since yesterday." "What does that mean?" "It means someone's adding to it," he said. His voice cracked from exhaustion. "It's not an accident anymore, Emily. It's deliberate." I swallowed hard. "Mom?" He looked away. "I don't know. I don't want to believe that. But she's been acting different. And whoever's doing this is inside the house." I stared at him, trying to process the impossible. My mind was spinning. "You said her medicine was switched," I said. "Could someone be targeting both of you?" He nodded slowly. "I've thought about that. But then I found something worse." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small bottle of pills. These were in her nightstand. They look like her prescription, but the pills are different, smaller, smell like metal. "Have you told the police?" He shook his head. "I can't. Not yet. If it's her, if she's sick, I can't hand her over. And if it's someone else?" The door behind us creaked open. We both froze. My mother stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable, her hand resting on the frame. "Why are you two whispering?" she asked softly. My dad straightened immediately. "Just checking something for school," he said quickly. She stepped inside, her gaze falling on the open papers and the bottle in his hand. "At this hour?" Her voice was calm, but her eyes were dark, sharp. What's that? He closed his fist around the bottle. Nothing. Her smile returned, faint but unsettling. You used to be such an honest man, Daniel. He didn't. Reply. The silence between them was unbearable. I felt like I was watching two people who once knew everything about each other, but were now strangers trying to guess who would move first. Finally, she said quietly, "Come back inside. The kids are waiting." He hesitated, then nodded. "We'll be right there." She turned and left. The moment she disappeared down the hall, he grabbed my arm. "You need to take Ethan and leave," he said urgently. "Now." My stomach dropped. "What about you?" "I'll distract her. You just get your brother out." "Dad, you're scaring me." He looked me straight in the eyes. "I'm scared too, but whatever's happening here isn't safe. Take Ethan and go to your aunt's. I'll call you when it's over." I wanted to argue, but something in his voice made me stop. He wasn't guessing anymore. He knew. We stepped out of the garage together. The living room was dim, only the glow of the TV lighting the room. Ethan sat on the couch, half asleep. Mom was standing behind him, still smiling. "Everything okay in the garage?" she asked. Dad nodded. "Yes, just finishing something up." Her gaze flicked to me. "You look pale, honey. Sit down, I'll get you some water." "I'm fine," I said quickly. She frowned. "You should drink something." Her insistence made my heart pound. My father stepped between us. "Enough, Laura." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you can control this house?" He didn't answer. He reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it once. A signal. I stood up slowly. "I'm going to help Ethan with his homework," I said, forcing a smile. She watched me carefully. "All right, sweetheart." I led Ethan toward the stairs, whispering as we climbed. "Pack a bag." Quietly. "We're leaving." He blinked sleepily. "What? Why?" "Just do it." As we reached the top of the stairs, a loud crash came from the kitchen, the sound of glass breaking, followed by my mother's scream. Ethan froze, but I grabbed his arm and pulled him toward my room. "Don't stop," I whispered. We could hear their voices downstairs, sharp and desperate. My father shouting, my mother crying, something slamming against the counter. I wanted to run back down, but I remembered the look in my father's eyes. "Go." I stuffed a few things into a bag and pulled Ethan toward the window. "We're going to the neighbors," I said. "Stay quiet." As I slid open the window, the lights downstairs flickered. Then, suddenly, everything went silent. No voices, no movement, just the faint sound of water still running from the sink. I turned back toward the staircase, my heart in my throat, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything about our family. And the truth we'd discover would be far worse than poison in the water. The silence that followed was the kind that felt alive, heavy, pulsing, almost breathing on its own. I froze by the staircase, one hand on the banister, straining to hear any sign of my parents. Ethan clung to my arm, whispering, "What's happening?" I didn't answer. My throat was dry, and my heart felt like it was beating inside my ears. Then came the sound. Slow footsteps from the kitchen, followed by the faint scrape of glass across the tile. I took a deep breath and stepped down the first stair. "Stay here," I whispered to Ethan. "Don't move until I tell you." He shook his head, gripping me tighter, but I pried his hand away and forced a reassuring smile. "It's okay," I lied. The closer I got to the kitchen, the stronger the metallic smell became. Sharp, cold, and wrong. The lights were dim, flickering from the overhead bulb. My mom stood by the counter, her back to me, hands resting on the edge of the sink. Shattered glass glittered on the floor around her feet, and a thin stream of water still ran from the faucet. "Mom?" I said softly. She didn't move. Then, slowly, she turned her head toward me. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused, her lips trembling as if she were about to speak. "Where's your father?" she whispered. I hesitated. "I thought he was with you." Her eyes flickered toward the floor. "He's not." I followed her gaze. That's when I saw it. A trail of water leading away from the sink, smeared with something darker. I stepped closer, careful not to step on the shards of glass. "Mom, what happened?" She turned fully now, and I saw the trembling in her hands. "He attacked me," she said. Her voice cracked. "He said I was poisoning us. He's lost his mind." I shook my head. "No, Mom, that's not what—" She grabbed my wrist suddenly, her grip like iron. Emily, listen to me. He's dangerous. You have to help me stop him. Mom, please. Do you trust me? She asked, her voice rising. I looked into her eyes that used to make me feel safe, and I didn't recognize her anymore. Her pupils were too large, her skin too pale, her words too quick. Before I could respond, a sound came from the other side of the house, the slam of a door. Her grip loosened. She turned toward the sound, panic flashing across her face. He's still here. I took a step back, my voice trembling. Where's Ethan? She turned back sharply. He's upstairs, isn't he? Go get him and lock the door. But something about the way she said it made me freeze. Her voice didn't sound like a mother protecting her kids. It sounded like someone trying to get me out of the way. I'll get him, I said carefully, stepping backward. Just stay here. The moment I turned, I heard another sound, a creak from the back door. My dad emerged from the shadows of the hallway, his face pale and streaked with sweat. He was holding something, a small brown bottle and a wet rag. Emily, he said quietly, step away from her. My mom spun around, her tone sharp. Don't you come near us. He raised his hand slowly. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want you to tell her the truth. What truth? She snapped. He looked at me, his voice breaking. The water, Emily. It's not poison. It's a sedative, one that builds up over time. She's been adding it to our drinks to keep us tired, compliant. That's why I haven't been sleeping right. That's why your brother's been sick. I felt the air leave my lungs. I looked at Mom, but she shook her head violently. He's lying. He's trying to make you hate me. He wants to ruin this family. My father's eyes were filled with tears. She's not who you think she is, Emily. Check her pills. They're not hers. Someone switched them. Mom's voice turned cold. You went through my things? He didn't answer. He reached for his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper, another folded note, stained with water. This is the first test result, he said, unfolding it with trembling hands. Traces of chloral hydrate in every sample. That's what's in the water. My mom lunged forward suddenly, snatching the paper from his hand. Stop, she screamed. You don't know what you're talking about. He caught her wrist gently, but firmly. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I loved you, Laura. I trusted you. Why would you do this? Her face changed then. Something inside her broke. Her shoulders dropped, her voice softening into a whisper. Because I couldn't lose you. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. She looked between us, tears forming in her eyes. You were going to leave, she said to him. You were both going to leave me. I could feel it every day. The distance, the secrets, the silence at this table. I thought if I kept us together, kept you here, we'd be happy again. My dad stepped back, horrified. You poisoned your family to keep us together? She shook her head frantically. Not poison, just enough to make you stay home, rest more, stop thinking about leaving. Her eyes filled with panic. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. It was just supposed to make you calm. I stood frozen, my mind unable to catch up. My dad reached for her again, but her knees gave out. She crumpled to the floor, gasping. Mom! I screamed, running toward her. My dad knelt beside her, checking her pulse. Her lips were turning pale, her breathing shallow. He looked at the counter. One of the broken glasses still had water in it. She drank it, he whispered. Too much this time. I grabbed the phone and dialed 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely press the buttons. Please, I cried. My mom isn't breathing right. We need an ambulance now. The minutes that followed were a blur. My dad held her in his arms, whispering her name. Ethan came running downstairs, terrified. When the paramedics arrived, they found her pulse, weak but present. As they carried her out, her eyes fluttered open for a brief second. She looked at me, her voice barely audible. I just wanted to keep you safe. Then her eyes closed again. When they drove away, red and blue lights flashing against the house, my dad stood in the doorway, shaking. It's over, he said quietly, his voice hollow. But I knew it wasn't, because some things don't end with sirens or hospital visits. They end with the kind of truth that you can never unhear. That night, I understood something that shattered me, that love, when twisted by fear, can become its own kind of poison. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and quiet sorrow, the kind of place where time slows down and every second stretches thin with waiting. I sat in the corner of my mother's room, the steady beep of her heart monitor echoing through the stillness. She looked fragile under the white sheets, her skin pale and her lips dry. The doctors said she would live, but it would take months to recover. The chemicals had damaged her liver and memory, and there was no guarantee she'd ever be the same again. My dad stood by the window, staring out at the parking lot. His shoulders looked smaller somehow, weighed down by something heavier than exhaustion, guilt. He'd saved her life by acting quickly that night, but I could tell he blamed himself for not seeing it sooner. Ethan sat on the floor with his knees pulled to his chest, eyes red and swollen. He hadn't spoken since we left the house. I looked at my mother and tried to remember her as she used to be, the woman who made pancakes in the shape of hearts, who kissed my forehead before every exam, who told me that family was everything. That version of her felt like a memory that didn't belong to me anymore. I couldn't decide which hurt more, what she had done, or why she had done it. When she finally woke up 2 days later, the first word out of her mouth was my name. "Emily," she whispered, her voice weak and shaky. I moved closer. "I'm here, Mom." She tried to smile, but her face trembled. "Where's your father?" "He's outside," I said quietly. "He'll be right in." She nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you." I wanted to tell her it was okay, but the words wouldn't come out. I wanted to believe she hadn't meant it, that she'd just been sick, confused, desperate. But the image of her hand pouring that glass of water, steady, certain, wouldn't leave my mind. Dad came in a few minutes later, his expression unreadable. He pulled a chair next to her bed and sat down, his hands clasped tightly together. "The doctors say you're going to recover," he said softly. She looked at him with a mix of fear and love. "Do you hate me?" He hesitated before answering. "No," he said finally, "but I can't pretend to understand why." Her lip quivered. "I was scared," she whispered. "You were distant. The kids were growing up. I thought I was losing everything." He looked down at his hands. "You almost lost us for real." She started to cry, and for a moment I almost went to her, but something inside me stopped. Love is supposed to protect, not destroy, and I wasn't sure which one hers had been. Over the next week, the truth unfolded in pieces. The police investigation confirmed what Dad had suspected: traces of chloral hydrate and sedative compounds in the home's water filtration system and her prescription bottles. It wasn't enough to kill instantly. It worked slowly, numbing the body, making the mind foggy. She had been taking her own mixture for months, believing it would calm the family. The doctors said it was a kind of psychological break, the result of untreated anxiety and dependence on medication. They didn't press charges. My dad refused to let them. "She needs help," he said, "not punishment." So she was transferred to a rehabilitation facility under medical supervision. The house stayed sealed for weeks after. I couldn't bring myself to go back. One afternoon, I visited the house alone. The air inside felt stale. The once bright kitchen, now a shell of what it had been. The water pitcher still sat in the center of the table, empty and harmless looking. I stared at it for a long time before walking into the garage. My father's old test strips and notebooks were still there, the evidence of the nights he'd tried to make sense of what was happening. I found the note he'd written me that night, the one that saved my life. The paper was crumpled and faintly stained, but the words were still clear. "Don't drink the water." I folded it carefully and slipped it into my wallet. In the months that followed, life started moving again. My dad went back to teaching part-time, trying to rebuild some version of normal. Ethan started therapy and slowly opened up about the fear he'd felt living in that house. And me, I learned that sometimes survival isn't about running away from danger. It's about seeing the truth, even when it destroys the image you had of the people you love. I still visit my mother every week. She's calmer now, quieter. Some days she doesn't remember what happened. Other days, she apologizes over and over. "You must hate me," she says. I always answered the same way. No, Mom, I just wish you'd asked for help instead. The hardest part isn't forgiving her. It's forgiving myself for not noticing sooner, for missing the signs, for thinking everything was fine just because she smiled. That night changed everything I thought I knew about love and family. It taught me that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers, but from the people who think they're protecting you. It made me realize how fragile trust really is, and how, once it's poisoned, it never tastes the same again. Now, whenever I sit down for dinner, I still catch myself watching the water, waiting for the glass to move, for something to feel off. It's a habit I can't break, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe some scars are meant to keep us alert. I keep my father's note tucked in my wallet, folded neatly like a quiet warning. It reminds me that one act of courage, one moment of instinct, can change everything. It's the reason I'm still here. And if you've made it to the end of this story, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what you would have done if your own parents slipped you a note that said, "Don't drink the water."